There is a lot of FPS games. So many, in fact, that there's enough to fill a whole landfill full of slop. Games that are meant to be copies to Counter-Strike, games that are just total garbage, they're everywhere. But outside of just multiplayer, there's a whole layer of FPS games that are made up on some of the biggest classics of all time. Games like Doom, GoldenEye, and Halo. These games are all just ancient. I mean, Halo pretty much ended at Reach, and GoldenEye is just a one-off game. I mean, Doom is the outlier, maybe Wolfenstein, but you know, Wolfenstein's had its rough patch recently. But within the indie game scene, there's been a return to these older style of games. It is the beginning of the return of the boomer shooter. There's just so many indie games that return under this umbrella. Games like Gloomwood, Mullet Madjack, Cruelty Squad, Neon White, I guess, and Ultrakill. Some of these are a bit slower paced, but they still make you feel like you're on some sort of drug, usually Adderall, maybe acid if you're playing Cruelty Squad, acid and Adderall. And honestly, anything you pick, there's a boomer shooter for it. It's honestly an homage to the original Doom, which had the energy of smoking cigarettes and drinking beer now that your wife's gone. Ultrakill, of course, is like a good mixture of both of them. It's fast-paced, has a lot of wacky visuals going on, and it takes place in hell. Actually, everyone already knows what Ultrakill is at this point. You'd assume they have a copy of the game straight out the womb. But for the 3 alien visitors who came down to Earth watching this is for you. Ultrakill is an early access game on Steam that mixes the style of older PSX style graphics with the modern fast-paced FPS controls, while still managing to keep the charm of what made a lot of older games like Doom fun. Ultrakill is most like Doom. I hate making comparisons, but it's more like the Doom remake, you know, the one from 2016, more than it is like the original. Somehow Ultrakill moves better than the 2016 remake. I'm not sure how that's even possible. Maybe I'm just picky or something, but it has the charms of what makes it still feel like a true boomer shooter from the past. First thing is, there's always been a thing with these old shooter games where it's all about a mascot of some kind. With Halo, you have Master Chief. With Doom, you have Doom Guy. With Wolfenstein, you have Blazkowicz. GoldenEye, you have James Bond. Okay, well, in Ultrakill, you have a robot. His name is Version 1 or V1. You've probably seen the little robot before. I mean, he's blue, he's a robot, he has wings. I mean, there's not much to say about him, but there's also a V2 in this game, which is just a smash reshade. It's just red. There's also something weird to be a robot over a human. I mean, most of our mascots are human, besides for like Arbiter in Halo 3 or 2, but who doesn't like a cool looking robot anyway? Second, it has to be an FPS game. Just imagine me wearing a shirt that says, I say things that are obvious, because of course a boomer shooter has to be an FPS game. Maybe a third person shooter, but you're really pushing it at that point. You're really pissing me off. I'm gonna wring your neck if you make it a third person game. I hate third person game. Third, the game has to be old. I don't know if that was obvious in the word boomer shooter, but it has to be old. Obviously, there's more nuance to it since Ultrakill is not an old game, but Doom is, and so is Halo, and at this point Halo 3 is, and maybe even Halo 4 if you really want to push it. And that's why Ultrakill is new and still feels like a boomer shooter. It just has the vibes of an old game. These vibes that make a game a boomer shooter in the modern form are found in a lot of games actually. Mullet Madjack, Gloomwood. I could only name 2, but I'm pretty sure there's a lot. What exactly makes these vibes anyway? Graphics? Gameplay? Is it just because you're in hell or not, or fighting a demon or an alien? Well, it isn't one specific obvious thing that makes it like this. Okay, maybe there is a specific obvious thing for Ultrakill, but it's still a mixture. Ultrakill, as I said, uses PX graphics, which is a great start. Everything has to have a good amount of polygons, pixels, whatever. Graphics are important, but the main thing that holds all boomer shooters and modern day boomer shooters is the vibe. Vibe is mainly just the combat, how it works within the game, the lighting, the graphics, the characters, how it's written, how the combat's made. You have a massive list of weapons with multiple upgrades, multiple arms you can use, parrying, sliding, jumping, dashing, punching. It's a focus on creativity and user choice that a lot of older FPS games had a fundamental part of their system, mainly for replayability, or just to make the game fun. Yeah, it's not a thing anymore. If you compare it to other games like Doom Remake, or back to comparisons, Halo 2, there's similarities of just having more weapons than you can possibly know what to do with. I mean, think about the Doom Remake, you got shotgun, pistol, chain gun, chainsaw, sword. Halo 2, you get SMG, double SMG, Magnum, double Magnum. Not to mention the weapons actually have to feel good to use. Classic weapons like the shotgun, revolver, chain machine gun, and obviously just your fist. These are classic weapons. The fist is mainly used for parrying and regaining health. By just punching enemies, you gain your health back. But there's also some other arms that do different things in Ultrakill specifically. In Ultrakill, you have 2 different sets of upgrades for each of these weapons as well as multiple fists. such as one that is used for parrying by punching and one that explodes whatever that's in front of you. One of the main weapon upgrades I used is the revolver one, where you toss your coin in the air and shoot it at someone, which is pretty much the only move I use. It's some real like JoJo shit. Actually, to be completely honest, I only use the revolver just because it gives you style points, no other reason. Then of course you have your enemies. Halo has the elites, Wolfenstein has a average Twitter user, and Doom just has the big meatball guy. Ultrakill has, well, not those honestly, but I do like the flamethrower guys. When it comes to Ultrakill's enemies, the main ones that are memorable are usually the boss fights, like V2, and at the very end you got Gabriel, which are just, you know, they're boss fights. They're not actual enemies within the world. The enemy design isn't bad, of course. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but you're trying to play fast all the time. You never just sit there and just look at the enemies. It's still your standard mix of what you'd seen in old shooter games. Super weak enemies used to fill the space. Weak enemies with range, stronger enemy with range, flying enemy. All boomer shooters have it, so does Ultrakill. A lot of these are just the staple enemy types you'd see in most games anyway. That specific variety just reminds me a lot of the older FPS style. More modern FPS games just tend to just keep throwing weak enemies until you fight a larger boss of some kind, or they just, you know, the bosses just aren't there at all. There just isn't that many single player FPS games like that anymore, besides for like Cyberpunk off the top of the head. Still, the game is themed around being in hell, which is represented in the enemy design and the level design, and a little bit in the music too. The soundtrack for the game is pretty good. It definitely feels old. I mean, that's the point, since it has that bit crush to it. And it's not even really a requirement, since boomer shooters like Halo have an orchestral soundtrack, and I mean, Half-Life had like Aphex Twin in the background and shit. Obviously, most of the music is fast-paced, high BPM stuff. That's the kind of music you're gonna want in a game that's so fast and chaotic. And I've mentioned the speed of this game a lot. I mean, a lot of FPS games just want to be Sonic the Hedgehog, specifically Sonic Forces, if you could even believe that. Now, I could sit here and talk about whatever games Ultrakill reminds me of, like a toddler pointing at colors at the wall. So instead, I'll just talk about games it doesn't remind me of.
Gee, Nick.
Okay, look, it's pretty clear that this game has a lot of inspiration from Doom 2016. I'm not an idiot. That is the gold standard of revitalizing an old FPS game into a modern form. You have the weapon upgrades, the punching for health, the same sort of thing around killing demons from hell. Both games have mysterious mascots who act as silent protagonists, and both games have a focus on clearing the levels quickly. The whole clearing levels quickly thing was a replay thing, but once you beat all the missions in Doom, why don't you just go back and get the best possible score, best possible time? And Doom 2016, it was something else. There was something there if you beat the full game, but Ultrakill has it from the very start in multiple ways. Both style and just general performance of this game add together to give you a final letter grade from each level, with P being for perfect, which I got a lot of those, let me tell you, and the highest being S, next to P. I didn't get anything below it, so don't even worry about it. And the actual levels themselves, you have a DMC style combo meter in the corner, which adds up based on how many times you've been hit without killing something, maybe actually hitting targets, using your weapon mods on targets, whether you pause the game or not or something, and your speed, obviously. Your speed is very important. But from personal experience, getting a perfect on every level is more about killing all the enemies without dying or getting hit, or either or. Partially, it's based on time, really, but for the most part, it's what I said before. It's more about your style. There's 3 types of levels in this game that are broken up into different sections using a chapter-like system. One is a boss fight level, which in the game are usually separated into their own sections, and if it's a mini-boss, maybe you have a couple enemies before it, but it's still going to be separated. The next kind of level is just a normal level with enemies and puzzles, you know? You have a thing you pick up, you put the thing where it needs to be. It's simple stuff. And then lastly, there's a multi-checkpoint level. These are so specific. I only gave them a specific section because they have a tutorial for it within the game, so I'm just gonna put it there.
Now I'm a little motivated.
All the levels are broken into different chapters, representing the player going into deeper levels of hell, with the top layer always being Twitter. Maybe nowadays that could be one of the lower levels, but it always, no matter what, ends in a Minecraft YouTuber's Discord. Watch out. Each one of these chapters have a specific level design to them. The first chapter reminds me a lot of like a non-rusty version of the Otherworld from Silent Hill, back to comparisons, having all these gritty looking air conditioning vents with the shadows spinning the vents on the wall. I feel like I'm Heather Madsen, and spinning saw blades everywhere and guillotines. You know, it's the basic horror stuff. The next chapter is this weird sort of green garden, has Claire de Lune playing in the background. I'm also pretty sure Claire de Lune is the name of the level. It's by Debussy. That's how you say his name. You have these fake glass screens showing a blue sky and fields and stuff. Very dystopian, which eventually becomes a flaming hellscape when it introduces the flamethrower enemies. Lastly, you have the cityscape chapter, which is pretty standard looking European city. I guess you could call it cyberpunk in the same way tech pants and belt buckles are. There's some other levels too, but these are the main levels that really stuck out to me. They really really describes all you need to know about how to design the game to be a boomer shooter. Level design in this game is actually pretty unique. With a lot of older games, you're just in the same area. I mean, the budget wasn't that high. Specific games like the original Doom, original Wolfenstein, you're just in blue wall hell. I mean, the original Halo, you spend a lot of time in library hell. I remember that nightmare. There's also just a lot to see, especially in the last set of levels where you can see this massive monster in the background staring at you, Big Brother style, big eyeball, making sure you don't commit no crimes. In some of the later half of the game, you can actually find some books you can read, which give you a little bit of lore. When you game over, you get a computer reboot sort of screen. When you pick up books, your character scans the books for useful information, just tosses it away. It just makes you feel like you're a robot. Obviously, there's some other parts about level design that are important. How big the corridors are, how small the corridors are, big empty spaces, traps, ways that you can die. Later on, you have some glass panes you can break and make enemies fall through. Simple stuff just for fun. Obviously, you have to mention boss fights in this game since, you know, they're kind of the thing that makes the game stand out as much as it does. I'm a sucker for humanoid boss fights. Fighting things that are massive ass dragons or monsters, it's just 100 times more fun. It's always been that way for me. The game has a lot of mini bosses and main bosses, of course, such as the sword robot, V2, which I mentioned earlier, and Gabriel. But for this, all I need to really talk about is V2 because he kicked my ass enough times for me to really understand him. The main thing I like about boss fights in Ultrakill is they're just actual boss fights. A lot of games like Doom, Halo, Half-Life, it just has a stronger enemy you fight. It punches, you punch it, you shoot it. It does like a little animation, ow, ow, and then it just dies. But Ultrakill actually has a boss fight feel like an event. It has a health bar, his name pops up, you know, I hate to say it, Dark Souls style. Some of them are pretty easy. This scorpion looking guy was easy because I just kept tossing the coin in the air and shooting the coin. But as soon as I tried using that on V2, kicked my ass. I spent a lot of time trying to understand why I suck at the V2 boss fight, just for the sake of this video, not because I was there for that long. And I actually got stuck because I had to actually dodge something for once. Usually you could just parry the things that are being shot at you with the arm, but since I've been just sitting there using the coin thing with my revolver, I never actually took the time to learn how to do anything besides press mouse 1 and then press mouse 1 again, and you know, the CS2 thing. You actually have to get stuck and you just have to dodge around. You have to actually play the game properly, dodging, sliding, shooting. You can even parry some of his attacks. He has this charged shotgun attack that's completely parryable. It takes like 9% of his health bar, but if it hits you, you're like just pretty much dead. For the majority of the fight, V2 uses a shotgun, which, you know, even with the standard attack, it takes the majority of your health. It's a shotgun, and since you have to get close to him to actually punch him to get your health back, and he's using a shotgun, it's just a mess for me. My aim in FPS games is pretty solid. I mean, honestly, I've been playing like CSGO since I was a child, or well, just CS, I guess, and I still just can't hit anything if something jumps in the air. The good part about this boss fight is if you do die multiple times like me, you just respawn at the door and you go straight in. The boss fight's level is actually pretty interesting too, since the whole theme is themed around the garden and Claire de Lune. You have this like puddle. It's like a little puddle shrine. You have like a glass church looking stained glass window that he comes out of. It's a vibe thing. He's a cool character. V2 is just kind of like you. He is still a killer robot like you. I'm not sure what the lore is. It's not something I'm gonna look into, but when you kill him, you get his arm, but you refight him later, but you still get his arm when you first fight him. Now, another thing about the boss fights, there's a couple characters that do this specifically. You actually see them throughout the levels before you fight them. You'll see them walking around, you'll see them smashing stuff. Specifically with the area before V2, you see that he killed a bunch of things before you even got there. It's just world building. It makes you feel like you're about to fight something. It's important stuff. Now, these boss fights really are more like an RPG style. They're set up, they have health bars, they have the names pop up. You see them throughout the level. You think of Half-Life, as I said, where you're fighting just a combine cruiser. You just hit it a couple times and it falls down, you end up having to fight 30 of them. There's no real boss fights. I mean, I guess in the original Half-Life 2, you have that boss fight where you're just shooting panels off of the teleporter thing, but it kind of proves my point. As I said, everything about games are just vibes based anyway. Now, vibes can't carry everything. The gameplay of Ultrakill still has to be good, but I will say the gameplay is smooth like butter. It's got so many things flying on your screen. I start feeling like I'm at a casino about to win something big. I'm just pulling down the switch and numbers, S rank, S, kill, 100 points, 1,000 points. It feels amazing to play. I think that's kind of part of what makes the new aesthetic of these modern versions of these boomer shooters anyway. Everything has to be be capturing your attention at all times, keeping you locked in. You gotta feel like you got YouTube Shorts open. You gotta feel like you got TikTok open. Maybe even 10 more screens. Maybe even Google Giggles. That's how bad it is. You got them scrolling away. That's what it feels like playing Ultrakill nowadays. This isn't baby shit, you know? This is real gaming. The kind where you sit in the chair, play for 20 hours straight. You have a gaming chair. You have a gaming computer. You have a gaming keyboard. 1200 DPI mouse. This is the kind of shit it wants to make you feel. With Ultrakill specifically, the gameplay just feels so responsive. In games that focus around movement, it feels sluggish to play if the movement sucks. When you slide, it feels great. When you move, it feels great. The jumping has a perfect balance between height and movement within the air. Dashing around feels responsive. The sliding feels good. I mean, in the footage, you can see me just sliding around everywhere. That's just kind of how I play. Lastly, of course, there's a big thing around graphics. Graphics are very important. You know, there's some people that want every game to look like they just stepped outside without actually having to leave their house. And then there's people who want every game to look like, you know, they pulled up a Virtual Boy. The main thing is indie games usually stay around the PSX era for 3D and the SNES era for 2D. I mean, it's kind of the gold standard. Now, honestly, it's been like that for a long enough time that eventually it'll start to be a PS2. I've seen some games that are GameCube styled. I've seen some games that try to look like Silent Hill 2 and can't capture it. But for 3D games and Ultrakill, it's still closer to the PSX. I don't personally think graphics make a game, but when you're trying to make your game feel old in a new coat of paint, you have to do it correctly. And with some other titles that fall into this modern shooter of boomer shooters, there's only really two main categories that people are trying to copy. Do you want to look like Doom, or do you want to look like Half-Life? Ultrakill wants to play like Doom, but visually it's just more like a Metal Gear or Resident Evil, the way the polygons on the screen look. Some of the models are a little bit crushed. You can actually like change the amount of bit crush and distortion the game has. Some of it even has to do with where your gun is on the screen, how much space you got, the lighting, how much lighting is on the gun. Other games that try to replicate the original Doom style a lot heavier usually just put the gun in the middle of the screen, have it bounce around like a 2D thing on your screen. Ultrakill doesn't do that. The gun is a physical object within the game, like Halo. You can see it, you can see the pixels, you can see the bullets coming out. For games that want to be more like Half-Life, there's some good examples. I found this game Chop Goblins. You know, it's the same guy made Gloomwood, but the gun is physically there. It's not sort of a PNG that sort of bounces around. And also some of it, you know, it's just the vibes. There's a Source style crosshair on your screen. There's still some other games like Gloomwood, which is honestly just in its own lane for me. I mean, Ultrakill is still in its own lane, but Gloomwood is like Resident Evil feels first person. Okay, well, first person it feels on the GameCube because there's first person Resident Evil. A lot of games that are trying to replicate that original Doom style kind of be really lazy about it. You know, you just put the gun in the center, you put it as a PNG, you make it bounce around, maybe even put your face in the corner doing little faces at you while you play. It's just, you call it a day, it's done. Not to say that's a bad thing. Everyone has their own style. Well, Gloomwood is a great game that can be talked about on its own. There's other games that caught my eye, mainly because unlike Ultrakill and every other game I wanted to actually talk about, it's not early access. You know, you need a finished product sometimes. I'm talking about Mullet Madjack. This game's fresh off the presses, fresh off the hot bun maker. I mean, it's on the Game Pass at this point, and maybe it will not be in the future, but I'm saying it is now. Mullet Madjack is a whole different ballpark of boomer shooter in a modern form. Instead of taking maybe like one Adderall pill, you've taken 3. You know, you're spazzing out in your chair, and maybe even have 2 monsters, 3 monsters, maybe a little bit of coke. The game makes you feel alive. There's so many numbers, there's so many flashy colors, there's a timer. It's like, oh, you better hurry the hell up, you're gonna die. There's a timer on your screen, there's a face in the corner. Yeah, there's guns, there's blood, there's violence, you're chopping people's heads off, you're kicking things. It almost feels as good as gambling or even drinking or driving. It just feels so good for the soul. Mullet Madjack still has a lot of the same goals as Ultrakill, especially in the gameplay. Well, one, really. Go fast. Everyone loves Sonic, so I guess everyone just wants to go fast. But Madjack has the speed as a built-in mechanic, rather than a you should play fast so your grades are high so your parents don't beat you kind of aesthetic of the game. Madjack has more of a retro aesthetic anyway, mainly being a mix of 3D and pixel art, having an anime style that looks like those old 90s cyberpunk animes, maybe a Cowboy Bebop. I can't name that many animes. Ghost in the Shell, that kind of thing. It's the cyberpunk theme before that's just about belt buckles and pants and having visors. It's not a super serious game, of course. It's mainly focused on gameplay, aesthetics, and fun, just like a slot machine. Not serious, all you do is win. Madjack has a system with 3 main elements. Your life is tied to the time on your little handheld phone. I guess it's like a screen phone of some kind. Kills and breaking stuff raises your time, which in turn raises your life. With 8 rounds, you select a new weapon, power-ups, upgrades, things to keep you going. Also, lore-wise, you're being streamed to a bunch of people. You're pretty much like Kai Cenat jumping around on the floor. You can pick up melee weapons to do finisher moves. You have some flowy movement, dashing, sliding. It also is basically the basic cyberpunk killing big corporation plot. I mainly played unlimited mode, and I just just sitting there locked in forever, Red Bull in hand, playing one-handed. Also, just like Ultrakill, I just use the revolver a lot. I like what I like. The game is a bit harder for direct comparison, like I did with Ultrakill. You know, it's the laziest thing ever, but since it's so stylized and specialized in its own form, it's still a little bit closer to the original Doom. Maybe there's some hidden games I don't know about. Ultrakill and Madjack are just about going fast, speeding through big hordes of enemies. That sort of difficulty is the gold standard of making modern day indie gaming, and retro indie gaming of course too. Honestly, difficulty has always been a part of indie games, and older games is a staple. It adds replay value, it adds a different perspective on how you have to play sometimes. Now, I will say something a little bit mean. A lot of boomer shooters outside of the standouts are really just starting to blend together at some point. You just put a 2D cutout of your character and he's shooting funny guns at aliens. I mean, there's only so many things you can do with such a specified format. When you look at FPS games that are highlights of what gameplay can be, a lot of games come down to flow of realism. You know, Battlefield, it's about realism. COD, it was about realism at some point. Now you can just play Seth Rogen. Ultrakill and Madjack aren't going for realism, but they're going for flow. They're trying to make you feel good. Games like Battlefield, as I said, and Rainbow Six Siege, while mainly being multiplayer, are realism first games. They've a focus on making you feel like you're actually on a battlefield. That's the main FPS style we have nowadays. The same thing eventually happens to all genres though. And a lot of games are of course going to be inspired by Ultrakill now that Ultrakill is the big player in the scene. A lot of games are still inspired by the 2000s, late 90s era, mainly the early 2000s still. The most developers like me, I'm not a game developer, but I grew up around games like Halo, Half-Life, Doom, Wolfenstein, GoldenEye. If you're extra special, maybe like Duke Nukem. But eventually, I get so incredibly bored of every FPS game being an Adderall-fueled speed rampage made for someone who has like 10 different phones. Google giggles, as I said. But with all these flashing colors and eye-bleeding graphics, it started to become like a little bit of a sludge pit. Ultrakill was one of the earlier ones, and it doesn't really fit the whole flashy colors thing. It's a lot of reds and a lot of blues. It's kind of more subdued. Madjack, complete opposite, but it has an aesthetic to it. It's still fun, of course, but there's just a large amount that aren't trying to provide something as creative as Gloomwood, which is one of the most creative games I've seen in my entire life, or Madjack. A lot of them are trying to be more like Ultrakill because, you know, Ultrakill's popular. There's still, of course, some things that are providing a unique experience. Then you have to get into the remix side of it. And I'm not talking about Doom 2016. A lot of companies are re-releasing their old shooter games trying to get on this wave. Others are making boomer shooter spin-offs like this Warhammer one. I don't know what they think about Warhammer. Don't even ask me. It's always going to happen where there's money. It's to be expected. That's all these companies think about. Money first, game second. So boomer shooters like Ultrakill have come back mainly through early access games that hold on to a fresher FPS style, to a classic graphical style. You know, you're trying to look like Doom, you're trying to look like Halo. Has a couple new gimmicks, mixtures from older FPS games, mixtures from newer FPS games. It's just trying to feel fresh. So what is the future? Like all games that are trying to reinvent the genre, you're gonna get stuck on how many possible ideas you could possibly have. Will you make it a story-focused game like Half-Life, or a multiplayer-focused game like Quake? Maybe a little bit of pixel art, 3D, make it look like the PS1, maybe the PS2, Xbox 360. Hopefully they won't get that soon. That'd feel really bad if they start doing Xbox 360 retro. I mean, the original games that they're based off are only getting older, and eventually younger generations will just start making games to replicate their childhood. Could you imagine some 10-year-olds sitting on Godot right now making a game that tries to match the vibes of 2017 Fortnite when things were good for them, when they're in elementary instead of middle? I guess they're 10, but right now it's mainly people from the 90s and early 2000s like me. My childhood games are still games like Halo, Half-Life 2. My favorite's still Final Fantasy X. They don't make games like that anymore. Prime audience of these games are people like me, you know, people in their 20s, 30s, but I don't like thinking that every game is always about targeting some kind of market. Even when I look up a game and get sturdy ads for it on YouTube after, Ultrakill, Madjack, Gloomwood, all of these indie development projects that are going for this boomer shooter vibe are created out of love most of the time. They want you to re-experience the magic and vibes that are brought up through childhood-like games, the basic nostalgia that things are always trying to go for nowadays. When it comes to modern games and modern indie games, they have always tried to push the scene forward. There's a lot of indie games right now that have been pushing things forward in terms of game. You have Hades, which helped make the roguelike. There was roguelikes before, like obviously you have Binding of Isaac, but now you have a bunch of them, and there's so many of them that people are just like, I'm just gonna go back and still play Binding of Isaac. I mean, the single player FPS game that is more about user experience and gameplay over trying to get you to buy a battle pass or a $20 battle pass that gives you all the parts of the battle pass, and then you don't actually have to play the game. And they're just a dying breed. They're gone. Their bones are rotting. The last one I could think about is Cyberpunk, which came out 4 years ago, but there's also like Bioshock. I don't want to think about Bioshock, specifically Infinite, but these are a dead bones game. They're gone. They don't make them anymore. Everything's about making you spend money. So why would they? If they want want you to play and they want you to keep playing, they got to get you to buy the battle pass and fight your friends online. Obviously, with a lot of indie games, replayability is a massive part of what keeps indie games alive. If your indie game isn't replayable, it's kind of just going to fade away after you get the first purchase. Indie games are pretty cheap, usually. They shouldn't be. They should be like 50-40 for some of these projects when they're done. A lot of them are early access, so when you're updating your game and trying to get your game along the course, you want people to keep thinking about your game and coming back to your game and wanting to play your game. That's kind of what replayability is about. When you take a game like Ultrakill or Mullet Madjack, these are finished games, or they're trying to be finished games in Ultrakill's case. They want people to come back and want to see what updates are being added. They want people to come back and keep playing their games, and that's why they usually add some, more game modes. Ultrakill has an endless mode. Mullet Madjack has an endless mode that has a hardcore mode. It's just things that keep your game alive. Honestly, with the big scene of everything having a battle pass, everyone wants to steal your time away from their game. But a lot of indie games are still trying to combat against that kind of time taking. Obviously, there's some outliers that are just one-time experiences. Some games are just not replayable at all. Mainly when you're trying to remake what old FPS games had over the modern scene, it's about creativity and grittiness of the style of gameplay. I mean, Ultrakill is a pretty gory game. You're punching enemies to death. You're running through hell as a killer robot. In Madjack, you're cutting robots' heads open with an axe like a madman. Shining style, you're just smacking robots' heads open, maybe even slicing their robot throats open. It's a lot less gory when it's a robot. Think about that. Right now, a lot of it comes down to how good the combat is, how good the movement is. A good amount of it is still trying to capture aesthetics. Always been like that with smaller games. These games are fun, they're replayable, they got all you need for a good game. Either way, we're at the start of a fast-paced, Adderall-fueled FPS game revolution, and the boomer shooters are coming back in full force to take over the team shooters. Hopefully. Anyways, that's it. Goodbye.